Welcome back to another recording of the Elevate Media Podcast. I'm Chris Anderson, your host. And today you're coaching out there. You're trying to build your coaching brand and business. And as you're doing that, your clients, maybe they're still in their 9 to 5, or maybe they're trying to figure out how to navigate both. And there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of underlying things that we might have to help guide people in whatever their journey looks like, whatever place they're in. And so maybe that's their emotions, maybe that's their loyalty, their commitment to their job and to their business. There's so much that goes into it. And so today we've got an expert who's going to kind of direct us and guide us in how we can do that better within our businesses. And so I'm excited to have Joe Mull on the show today. He is a multi-author. He's got 3 books out there. He's been in multiple media platforms like Forbes, International Business Times, et cetera, many of those. And he's really keen. He's really an expert on this thing, what he calls employalty. And we're going to kind of dive into that more. And that's also one of his books he's written. So, Joe, welcome on the Elevate Media Podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward. This is a different kind of topic, a different direction, but I'm excited to dive into it and figure out what is employalty for one, and then how we can tie that into our coaching businesses, our agencies. But before we kind of get into all that good stuff, I got a kind of an iceberg question for you. And so I don't know if you're into any plays or musicals at all, but if you are, do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite musical? Okay, I can't tell if you did homework on me and this is just a very
Complete
strategic and
random.
thoughtful question. Really? My
Completely.
bachelor's degree.
I actually use
Okay.
these random card off the top.
My bachelor's degree is in music and theater. And my
Okay.
original goal in college was I wanted to be on Broadway. So I am a musical theater
That's
nerd,
awesome.
right? And still do some music and performing. I teach acting at our local community
Oh,
theater for
cool.
preteens. And so it's a really big part of my life. So you kind of nailed it with that first
Oh, that's
question, man.
awesome.
Probably top of the list for me is Les Mis. Les
Mm,
Miserables is my all-time favorite musical. I'm also a huge fan of, I mean, who's not, of Hamilton. And
right.
I would say also the third on the list. You asked me for one, I gave you three. I'm
That's
sorry.
no, that's awesome.
A number of years back in the 90s, there was a musical called Jekyll and Hyde that I just
Mm,
still adore. The music is fantastic. So that's my
that's
answer, and I'm
cool.
sticking to it.
That's awesome. I know in a high school, so I was in the musical in high school my senior year, and that's one thing looking back. I was in drama multiple years in high school, but I was like, man, if I could do it again, I would do the musical every year I could. Middle school through. It's just so much fun. I'm not good at singing at all. They just basically needed people, but just to be a part of it. And we go to the musical every year because we live close to where I went to school and stuff. And my niece is in it, and they just did The Music Man, and
Ah,
so they did really good at that, and I just enjoy them. I enjoy my wife's seen Lion King on Broadway in London. She really liked that, but yeah, I know they're entertaining to me too, and community theater, like you mentioned, you teach preteens, like, that's something, like, once I have a little bit more bandwidth time-wise to
yeah.
prioritize, I would love to get into, like, drama again and just even
Yeah.
just a little thing, 'cause it's just fun and it's a community, and so that's really cool. I'm glad that question popped
That
up.
worked. Yeah, my
Yeah.
daughter's 12 and she's involved in the community theater, and I
That's
think
cool.
all the reasons that you probably enjoyed drama in high school are all the
Mhm.
reasons it's working for her now, which is
Yeah.
like you get all these kids who are coming together and working on a thing and on stage behind the scenes. It's a heavy lift to pull off a show, and so
Yeah.
you kind of become a little family. So there's
Yeah.
a kind of a bonding and a safety and a camaraderie that comes from that, and it's special to watch her get to do that.
Oh, yeah, I bet. That's really cool. Yeah, my senior year, we did Beauty and the Beast.
Uh-huh.
And so the big stretch for me was learning the ballroom dance because I was a ballroom dancer, so a little bit more than just an extra, and man, I have 2 left feet, I swear, so that was a lot of work trying to learn all that, but yeah, a lot of fun. So that's cool, and it stretches you too, and I think it's a good thing to kind of be involved in because you learn a little bit more of speaking and
Yeah.
enunciating, and which I definitely always have to work on. So, well, that's really cool. I like that. That's neat. Have you ever been in an opera? It's not really a play or musical, but do you like opera at all? It's a random.
I'm not a huge opera fan, though I have been in
Okay.
a couple of operettas. So an
Okay.
operetta is sort of like a short one-act version of an
Mm,
opera, and so I did a couple of those in college. I have sung from some operas, right? When you go get a degree in voice, you've gotta learn all the
mhm.
different kinds of music. So I've sung from The Marriage of Figaro and some of those other kind of more popular shows that people have heard of.
That's cool. So do you notice any correlation from being in drama in the musical world to growing a business or helping people in corporate world or their commitments? Do you see is there anything that you carry over from one to now what you're doing with businesses?
It's funny, I think when I started getting involved in the world of theater and performing, you just draw people from every imaginable walk of life. And so I think that I had a whole host of experiences with diversity and equity and inclusion and having empathy and understanding for all these really unique and powerful differences in the human condition because we were all on stage together and we were all building something together. And I think that can translate to the workplace if people are open to those experiences and being willing to listen to how your experiences differed from mine and where maybe I had advantages and you didn't. I think that certainly is a big part of how my theater experience influenced me on a personal level. It's funny because I'll have people say, "Well, aren't you sad that you're not using your performing arts degree?" I'm a professional speaker. I'm on stage every week, and so I use my performing arts degree every day, right? It's all sort of in the mix of what has gotten me to where I am today.
Yeah, that's cool. I just love the connection of our past, of what we've been through and what our talents and abilities there, how it correlates to what we're doing today. So that's really neat. I like that a lot. With that, you say you speak a lot now, and we're gonna get into the employability. We really are, but I thought this would be an interesting question too that just kind of popped in my head. When you're going to speak, do you still get butterflies at all when you get on stage? And how do you deal with those if you do?
I don't know that I would call it butterflies, but there's
Mhm.
like a nervous energy. And it's
Yeah.
not nerves as in, oh, I hope this doesn't crash and burn. Because when you do something enough, I very much can do the mental gymnastics of saying, okay, this has worked everywhere else. It's going to work today. Just go do your best and show up in service to this audience, and it's going to be fine. But there is always that little bit of just kind of energy around. It's like the first day of school every time. You're like, okay, I hope this goes well. I've been kind of looking forward to this, and here we go. And so there is definitely a pop in
Mhm.
my energy, but it's only a small bit of nerves.
Gotcha. Yeah, it definitely is a progression of doing it enough where you're like, yeah, just that nervous excitedness, and it's like then you get out there and it just kind of you just get in that zone almost, that flow and kinda go, so that's cool.
And maybe even the first day of school analogy isn't the right one because it's probably like Christmas Eve. That's
Oh,
probably
yeah.
the better analogy, right?
Yeah,
Can't wait. Let's go.
right. No, that's good, I like that. So, well, cool. So, kinda now getting into the kinda main topic, would you explain for the people and myself a little bit, what is employalty? What does that mean?
Yeah. So I've really spent the better part of the past 20 years teaching leaders how to be better bosses and how to create the conditions at work for people to thrive. And when the time came for me to write this book, I really wanted to marry together all of that knowledge and experience and a lot of the social science research that we have around what activates people at work with what's happening at this moment in the job market and in the aftermath of a global pandemic. And so when
Mhm,
I sat down to lay all of this out, I needed to come up with a word that captured what we have to get right. And so employalty is a word I made up. And it sounds like we're talking about employee loyalty, but really it's a portmanteau of the words employer loyalty and humanity. And so my official definition of employalty is that it's the commitment employers make to a more humane employee experience because
mhm.
that's what activates commitment at work. We're going to get into this in greater detail, I'm sure, but the long and short of it is that there has been a lot of turmoil in the job market because there's a massive recalibration taking place around how work fits into people's lives. And they're looking for upgrades to their quality of life. That's why so many people are switching. They're pulling their head out of the sand and saying, I think I'm going to look around for a new opportunity. And the things that they are looking for or the reasons they're unhappy with their current situation, we can make a long list about pay and commute and better bosses and more fulfilling work. And it really all rolls up to this bigger idea of quality of life. And so
Mm.
that's where the idea of employalty comes in, a more humane employee experience.
Yeah, and I think that's a really cool thing, a definition, a word to use because yeah, we have seen so much change. And I think through the pandemic time, I think that's what's drawn so many people to try to build a side hustle
Yeah.
because they're almost tired of that 9 to 5 positioning and they want that freedom. And so with that, so how can you tie that into someone who might be coaching others to build a business or coaching them in their finances? How can they employ employalty within their clients?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what we learned because I think that's going to give some context
Yeah.
and it's really going to speak to what you just said about why so many people want to start their own business or do a side hustle. So, we analyzed more than 200 research studies and articles on why people quit a job or take a new one or stay with an organization long term. And I can tell you with conviction that employers will find and keep devoted employees when they win in three areas of the employee experience, what we call ideal job, meaningful work, and great boss.
Mm,
So, ideal job comes down to my compensation, my workload, and flexibility. When my compensation, my workload, and a certain amount of flexibility are right in my job, that job fits into my life like a puzzle piece snapping into place. Meaningful work is about purpose, strengths, and belonging, right? Do I believe my work matters? Does it align with my gifts? And am I doing it with people that accept me and celebrate me for who I am? When that happens, I'm in meaningful work. And then the third dynamic is what we call great boss. And we know that there are a dozen things that leaders have to get right before someone's going to call them a great boss. But we think the most important are trust, coaching, and advocacy. When we
mm.
have bosses who engage in those three behaviors consistently, employees look around and say, I've got a pretty great boss. So now, if you think about the experience of being your own boss, of starting a business, you can pretty quickly get nearly all of those things, right?
Yeah.
When you start your own business, if you enjoy a certain amount of success, you could take the roof off of your earning potential. You get a lot of flexibility to set your own schedule. You can manage your own workload. You can zero in on what you want to do, which is tied to purpose and strengths. And hopefully, if you're your own boss, you're taking good care of yourself. You're a great
Right.
boss, right?
Yeah.
And so we see so many people moving toward that lifestyle because it releases them from all of the inhumane experiences that they've been having as employees elsewhere, where they had
Mhm.
no flexibility, or they were underpaid, or overworked, or had a bad boss. And
Yeah.
so when we think about that model of ideal job, meaningful work, and great boss, where it's useful for coaches is if you're working with somebody who is unhappy and doesn't know why. You can actually ask them the right questions in the right order, as a good coach does, to start to self actualize some insight into what it is they're not getting where they are or what they should be looking for when the time comes to make a new move.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's really a crucial piece is understanding those 3 things and be able to ask the questions around that because as you're trying to help them as a coach improve whatever it is, business, finances, knowing those things, I guess from your perspective, why is that so crucial? Like, why when they're building something, why is it so crucial for them to even understand those 3 topics?
Well, I think we know that a good coach treats their coachee as the expert in their own problems, right? If we adhere to the true spirit of coaching, you're not necessarily there to give advice very often, if at all. You're there to ask questions so that they can uncover their options, their potential solutions, and their best next steps.
Mhm,
And so, behind that, though, I think we have an obligation as coaches to at least have some basic understanding of human psychology and of what makes people tick a little bit. And the good news is that we don't have to rack our brains to figure out, where does commitment come from at work? What are the buttons to push and the levers to pull that activate intrinsic motivation, that activate a psychological and emotional commitment to work? When I decided to write this book, it was really born out of me realizing that I didn't have a one sentence answer to that question of where does commitment come from at work? That we know there are a whole host of things we have to get right, but if we want to work in service not just to leaders and business owners, but to employees at work and be able to articulate what are the things that we have to get right in order for people to be happy and fulfilled at work, what are they? And that's really what this model and this framework was about, was getting to that one sentence answer, that commitment and retention appear when employees are in their ideal job doing meaningful work for a great boss. If I'm a coach and I have that understanding of the psychology of what people need to be at their best, I can help them sort through in a way, and we call it in the book a scorecard. I can help them sort through this sort of internal psychological scorecard that everybody has to say, well, it sounds like you're getting A, B, and F, but it looks like D, E, and G are lacking for you. Let's talk about why that might be and help you figure out where you can get those things from.
yeah, and I think once we can break down a lot of those psychological boundaries or overcome those blocks by visualizing, by realizing those things or the issues through the questions, I think that opens up a lot of growth itself within their own businesses that they're trying to build aside. I
Yep.
think that, yeah, frees them and allows them to take those next steps within their own business.
Absolutely, no question. And I think that I'm a small business owner too. I started my business 10 years ago and I'm celebrating the 10-year anniversary this summer. And it's nothing I aspired to do. I was madly in love with the work I was doing as the head of learning and development for a top ranked healthcare system. And in February of 2013, I got called into an office with a bunch of other HR colleagues, and we were told, we're reorganizing the entire structure. This entire HR department has been eliminated. You're going to be with us for 3 more months and we'll decide if we have a place for you. And I was told, hey, Joe, we love your work. You're an asset. We want you to stay. We're going to try to pay you the same. We're just going to move you over here. But over here was a massive change and it wasn't the right fit for me. And so I can look now at this model that I've written about and recognize what I was getting and what I wasn't. But the
Mhm.
impetus for me was really I loved the work I was doing. That was about to change. I didn't want to give up the happiness and the fulfillment that I had in that kind of work. And in that role, I had a ton of autonomy and flexibility around my own direction and how I served the people I was in charge of, that I was inspired to jump off a cliff, right? I had a 2.5-year-old and a 6-month-old at home, and I was the primary earner. And so, like my wife and I say, I jumped off a cliff and had to make it work. And I think
Mhm.
as coaches, a lot of us maybe don't necessarily choose to go out into the world and create a business, but circumstance gives us a nudge. And if we can make it work quickly, then we experience maybe a level of fulfillment that we never have before.
Yeah, and that's kinda what I found when I started. I just got to the point where my income was gonna be, I mean, it was capped basically in what I was doing
Yep.
previously, and I just felt like I had more to give to the world. Not that I'm something special, but I just knew that if I could figure that out, I could reach a lot more people through podcasting because 'cause I'd already been starting it. So
Mhm.
yeah, I kinda leaped off the cliff too, right in the pandemic time, which was a great
Yeah.
step with no real parachute, but we figured it out. And I think with that too, like, understanding, like, thinking back to my journey, these 3 stick out. Like, I understand what I was missing and why I took the steps I did to be where I am now, and I'm so thankful that I did. But kinda with that next step then, as these business owners, these solo entrepreneurs are maybe getting to the point where now they can bring on contract employees, or maybe their first employee that they get, they're at
Mhm.
that level now. How can they create a quote unquote workplace, even virtually, that kind of follows your employee guides for a better place to keep people wanting to work for you and helping you and doing
Yeah.
their best?
Yeah. Well, there are two things I think that are at the foundation of understanding what it means to create a more humane employee experience. And the first is to simply accept that in general, people do a great job when they believe they have a great job. So this sort of excuse me, this sort of concept is really about putting the employee at the center of their own employee experience. And I think if we ask ourselves the question, what would make this place the very best place to be a blank? We start to turn the mirror inward and try to engineer the right kind of conditions for that person to succeed. So if I'm hiring an administrative assistant, or maybe I'm hiring a salesperson, or maybe I'm trying to hire somebody that can help us with finance and marketing or some things behind the scenes, maybe I'm hiring a second coach.
Mm.
Asking that question, what would make this place the very best place to be an administrative assistant or to be a coach? Actually forces you to look around at what others are doing, look around at what is drawing people to certain kinds of roles, look around at what keeps them there, and look in the mirror around what you're doing well and what you'll need to pay attention to going forward. So, with that in mind, I think one of the first things that small business owners, entrepreneurs struggle with when they begin to hire and onboard is letting go of the
Mhm.
and giving control of it to others. And guilty as charged. I have
Yeah.
4 employees and I run a small business. And despite the fact that I do this for a living, I teach leaders how to be better bosses and how to onboard and how to grant people the autonomy that they need at work to be at their best. It's still hard, especially if you've been running a business by yourself, right?
Right.
We've had to be scrappy and we've had to do it all ourselves, and it can be really hard to let go of things. So, here's a general tip. Don't delegate tasks, delegate responsibilities. When we delegate tasks, we turn ourselves into a micromanager. First, I want you to do this, then I want you to do that, then bring it to me and I'll check it. And then we're not buying back our time. We're just exchanging one set of to-dos for another. And we don't end up getting the benefits of hiring extra help. What we need to do once we get someone onboarded and trained appropriately is we need to tell them, you have responsibility for this outcome and this outcome. Here are some preferences that I have on how you get there. And
Yeah.
I want us to keep working together and communicating, but it's your responsibility to achieve that outcome. And I think as leaders, we have to accept that people are going to get to their work product in ways that are different than how we would do things. What we have to pay attention to is that difference doing harm to the business? Because if it's not, then we need to let go of that. And we need to give people the space and the creative freedom to do what they do the way they want to do it and to learn from their mistakes along the way. So let go, don't delegate tasks, delegate responsibility.
Yeah, and I think those are 2 huge things to remember, and they're hard. It's not always the easiest thing to do for sure. Because I mean, for the longest time, it's been your baby, right? It's been your
Yep.
thing that you're trying to grow and to give pieces away. It's hard to experience the same thing as we've grown and had some contractors working for us on a regular basis. It's like, yeah, it's just a new I didn't make this up, I can't remember who told it to me originally, but new levels, new devils. It's like you
Right.
get and that you're outsourcing things, and the struggle is actually letting go,
Yeah.
and giving them responsibility over things that you have held so close to yourself to get it done right, and so, yeah, that I think that's a huge piece is being able to onboard someone to help and trust that they can get it done and let them do their thing.
Absolutely. And we have a whole chapter on that in the book, right? Each of these dimensions of this model needs to have some depth behind it and some explanation as to how you engineer it. So there's an entire chapter in there about granting trust and
Mm,
earning trust. There's a lot in there about the kinds of scripts or conversations with scripts that you can have. And I don't mean scripted conversation, but I mean prompts that you can use to tee up some of the conversations that earn trust and that develop that kind of relationship where you're able to key in on someone's strengths. I think that's the other piece of this is when I hire somebody for my team, I have a general idea of what I want that person to own in their
mm,
role, but I am always going to craft that role to that person's strengths. So, for example,
mm,
I have a full-time operations person. And when I brought her in, my thinking was that it would largely be a sales role. Well, she has some extraordinary strengths around finance and around operations. And so she has actually taken on some things that weren't on my radar initially for that position, but she enjoys that work and it plays to her strengths. And so this is something called job crafting, where you tweak a
mm.
role to fit with someone's talents. And so you get so many benefits from that, right? We're sort of trained that we want to go at someone's weaknesses and coach them up to at least average. But when we do that, we're zeroing in on a commitment to mediocrity, right? We're striving for mediocrity. Whereas if you key in on someone's real gifts and their real strengths and you say, how do I position them to do that as
Mhm.
often as possible? You're going to get the best of them. You're going to get their loyalty and you're going to get whatever it is that they're doing for you at the highest level of quality by zeroing in on strengths and by tweaking roles to allow that to happen.
Yeah, that's huge and such a good valuable insight with that. I like that crafting that position around and not just being super specific on things because people have a lot of strengths. And I think that's the thing. And I want to say it was Henry Ford, the story I heard about Henry Ford, and he was on trial or in front of a board of people who are grilling him with questions. And because of something happening, I can't remember. You might have to look it up. But long story short, they asked him a certain question about the business or something of that nature, and he said, "I don't know." And they
Yeah.
said, "Well, you run like the biggest company in the world, and you're telling us you don't know this." And he said, "Right." He said, "I could pick up this phone and hit this button and call, the person who has that answer.
Yeah.
I don't that's not why we're successful is because I bring on the best people to do these jobs so I don't have to, because that's not my zone of genius." And it just again, I paraphrase that whole story, but basically, like, that's the thing. Like, only good at certain things. I'm not good at everything. And so if I can bring on
Yep.
those people and craft those positions that work to their strengths and their zones of geniuses, that's just going to lift everything up so much better than if we just try to do a cookie cutter type approach.
Right. And when you delegate tasks in the way that we talked about and you don't
Mhm.
exchange your time and you don't get the benefits of having someone who owns things, you're
Yep.
not in a position to do what only you can do in your business as the owner or as the leader or as the deliverer of the expertise. And
Yep.
so you're actually shooting yourself in the foot in terms of the overall productivity and performance of your business. The ideal circumstance for a business owner is that I am only doing the things that only I can do,
Yep.
and everything else you hire for. And as you scale, as you grow, that has to be the emphasis, but it requires us to let go of some things, and that is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's all part of the growth journey, right? Letting go to get to the next level. It's like the
Yep.
story I did an episode previously about hunting monkeys and the people went after, they're trying to hunt these monkeys for whatever reason. They're just all over the place. They can't catch them. They put a jar and they fasten it to the floor of the jungle. They put a piece of fruit in it that the monkey loves and it comes down. The monkey sticks his hand in there, grabs the fruit, and he can't get his hand out. He's trapped.
Mhm.
And so the hunters are moving in on him and he still can't get away because he's got this hand gripped around this piece of fruit and won't let go. So he can't pull out. And that's kind of like as we grow a business, we're holding on
Yep.
to certain things or certain aspects and we think we can only do it best when we really can. If we would just let go of those, we can kind of get out of that rut or what
Yep.
level we're in to the next one. So but Joe, man, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed this talk. I think it's something we have to think about as business owners, as those coaching others, trying to help
Mm.
and improve those positions, just how to do things better and how to create a better business and happier employees and just understand the psychology of like why we want certain things from our job or from our business. So I appreciate you being on today. Before we wrap things up, couple things. One last kind of question is if you could go back 2013 even,
Mm.
and talk to yourself, would you give yourself any advice?
Wow. I am so lucky, Chris. The trajectory of my business has been pretty great since I started. We all have our ups and downs,
Mm.
but I don't know that I would wanna go back and risk putting a blip in the matrix, right? And messing up how I got to where I'm at. I mean, I certainly made a lot of mistakes along the way. I think one of the pieces of advice maybe that I would give myself is don't wait so long to charge what you're worth, right? I know a
Mm,
lot of small business owners who early in the hustle, they're taking everything that they can and because hey, you gotta eat. But
yeah,
I think along the way, I've had a lot of mentors and friends in my community and in my network who have encouraged me that, hey, you're probably maybe not charging enough. And now when I look at like when I quote the number for speaking, I still have that kind of flip in the stomach where it's like, I can't believe that's the number.
right.
And you know what? And I think that a lot of that, if I can mention it, is a result of being active in the National Speakers Association, and
Mm,
it's really been a home for me. It's a community of speakers, coaches, consultants, trainers, just anybody who uses their expertise and their wisdom to help others tackle problems, really have helped me understand how to build a better business, and as a result, I am where I'm at today. So maybe I would encourage myself to even get involved in NSA earlier and
that's
to
awesome.
go to even more conferences.
That's awesome. That's cool. I think that's a great piece of advice. So appreciate you sharing that. Where can people find you, reach out to you, get connected with you, and find your book?
Well, thank you. So, Employalty is out on May 9th, and you can order it anywhere you like to order books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you want to support your local independent bookstore, you can go to indiebound.org and source a book from your local bookstore, which is really cool. We like to support those whenever we can. And you can find me over at joemull.com, JOEMULL.com.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Everyone get connected with Joe. Take a look at that book and get yours ordered. And again, Joe, appreciate you being on Elevate Media Podcast today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Chris.